He's on Instagram Live, laughing, loose. The kind of clip the internet turns into a punchline by morning. Then Emmanuel Acho gets on air and says the words nobody wants to hear. A mental health crisis. Not funny anymore.
Brandon Aiyuk, to me, he's just showing signs of mental instability. There's no more kind, delicate way for me to put it. He's showing signs of mental instability.
Before you decide what you think of this guy, know this. This isn't a video about a receiver mad about money. This is about a man who might be sick and a system that can't do anything about it.
They know how I get. And they running from that belt that's on the way. It's inevitable. It's coming. Stop running. Stop being a female dog.
Brandon Aiyuk grew up in a house where football wasn't just watched. His mother was a 49ers fan, and she had him in red and gold before he was even old enough to have a favorite team. And every Sunday that game came on, the whole house felt it. So when San Francisco called his name 25th overall in the 2020 draft, that wasn't just a career beginning. That was the thing he had been chasing since before he could tie his own cleats. But here's what most people didn't realize. He didn't arrive clean. Most programs only wanted him to return kicks, not run routes. So he started at junior college, then grinded his way to Arizona State, fighting for the position he actually played at every single stop. His coach at Sierra College said Aiyuk would stay in the weight room after 4-hour practices in 110-degree heat and then demand the quarterback stay too. By 2022, he had his first 1,000-yard season, 8 touchdowns, and a breakout that told the league he was real.
Take the handoff. Screen pass. Aiyuk. Burst of speed, and he's in. Touchdown.
And by 2023, that drive had a number on it. 75 catches, 1,342 yards, 7 touchdowns, 3rd in the entire NFL in yards per route run, and 4th in receiver impact metrics across the whole sport. The Purdy to Aiyuk connection was being called one of the most efficient quarterback-receiver pairings in football that year. At 25, he had become exactly what San Francisco thought they were drafting. That wasn't hype. That was the tape. So what does a player like that do in the summer before the biggest contract of his life? He skips OTAs, holds out at training camp, and makes clear there is exactly one team he'd accept a trade to: Pittsburgh. A dozen teams are calling the front office. At one point, the deal is already being finalized on the phone when Aiyuk shows up at the facility that same afternoon. Shanahan can't reach anyone in the building because the trade is moving in real time, so he physically runs upstairs and stops it himself. Then he gives Aiyuk one choice: sign the extension on the table or be on a plane to Pittsburgh by the end of practice. Now think about what that moment actually meant. A kid who grew up a 49ers fan, whose mother dressed him in red and gold before he could walk, standing in the building that had been his childhood dream, given until sundown to decide whether to stay or go. He chose to stay. 4 years, $120 million, $76 million in total guarantees, the 6th receiver in NFL history to clear $30 million a year. The childhood team. The contract that finally matched the resume. From the outside, it looked like the ending of the story. But a contract tells you what a team was willing to pay. It says nothing about what's happening inside the person cashing it. And within 14 months, that distinction would matter more than anything else in this story. The 2024 season had barely found its footing. 25 catches, 374 yards, 0 touchdowns through the first 7 weeks. Week 7 of 2024, Kansas City at Levi Stadium. Aiyuk comes off the line, runs his route, plants his right foot to cut back toward the ball, and goes down without anyone near him. And when the medical report came back, he had a torn ACL, torn MCL, and a torn meniscus, all in the same right knee, 2 months after signing the biggest contract of his life. Can you imagine being that close to everything you ever wanted and watching it disappear in a single play? This isn't an injury where a team posts a recovery window and the story moves forward. This is the kind where no one gives you a real timeline, because the ligaments that let a wide receiver plant and cut and explode don't follow a predictable schedule. And here's the part that never makes the injury report. Data published in the American Journal of Sports Medicine shows 42% of athletes who go through ACL reconstruction meet the clinical criteria for major depressive disorder. The body stops producing the natural chemicals that daily training had generated for years. The routine that built a person's entire identity disappears overnight. So ask yourself what that actually means for a man who had just signed the contract of his life with his childhood team and 14 weeks later couldn't walk without a brace. That injury isn't just a knee. That is the floor going out from under everything he built his life around. So he goes into rehab. The 2025 season gets circled on the calendar, and for a while, it looks like things are moving the right way. Then, by the summer of 2025, reports started coming out that he's been missing sessions. In July 2025, San Francisco voided nearly $27 million of his 2026 guaranteed money, citing the rehabilitation clause in his contract. Shanahan speaks about it publicly and says something you almost never hear from a head coach. In 22 years of coaching, he has never once seen a contract get voided that way. But that's not the part that told the real story. Coaches and teammates tried to reach him. Nothing came back from any of them. Shanahan would later describe it this way: "It officially stopped for me when the last time I tried to get a hold of him and couldn't, and then tried a couple more times and still couldn't."
Eventually, there's not much of an explanation because it's really hard for us and anyone else to understand. And that's why it's something I've never seen in 22 years of coaching.
In January 2026, John Lynch stands at a podium and says it plainly. It's safe to say he's played his last snap with the Niners. Someone asks why Aiyuk went silent in the first place. Lynch's answer: "I wish I knew." And that's the moment this stops being a contract story. Because that silence, the one nobody inside that building could explain, was never just about a contract. Then a video surfaces. Aiyuk is behind the wheel of a Cadillac Blackwing on Tasman Drive, right past the 49ers' own practice facility in a posted 40-mile-an-hour zone. The speedometer is right there in the frame. 104 miles an hour. Other clips in the same video push past 110. He filmed it himself from the driver's seat and posted it publicly. A few days later, he apologizes. Says he was praying with his son that night and wouldn't want anyone to miss the chance to do the same with the people they love. Then, 5 months later, in June, a misdemeanor arrest warrant is issued for exhibition of speed.
An arrest warrant has been issued for San Francisco 49ers player and Rockland native Brandon Aiyuk on a misdemeanor speeding charge.
He posts himself on a racetrack, completely unbothered. And the posts keep coming. He calls the front office little-ass boys, compares his situation to modern-day slavery, accuses his union representatives of lying and withholding information. Then he fires his agent, Ryan Williams, the moment he finds out that same agent was the best man at John Lynch's wedding. Now, this is where Emmanuel Acho, a former NFL linebacker with a master's degree in sports psychology, puts his name to something almost nobody in the industry will say out loud. And he says it twice. First, we could quite literally be watching Brandon Aiyuk in the midst of a mental health crisis. Days later, on air again.
Brandon Aiyuk, to me, he's just showing signs of mental instability. It's just, there's no more kind, delicate way for me to put it.
Then, somebody needs to check in on Brandon Aiyuk. Acho is also the one who raises Antonio Brown not as a diagnosis, but as a mirror. The jersey thrown into the stands in Tampa, the mid-game walkout, the rants the internet turned into content and shared without once stopping to ask what was actually happening to the man in real time. By the time anyone asked the real question out loud, it was already over. Acho wasn't saying Aiyuk is brown. He was saying the audience is the same. And everyone watching already knows what they did last time. Here is where it has to be said plainly. CTE cannot be diagnosed in a living person. No scan or blood test visible on a screen confirms it while someone is still alive. No diagnosis is being made here, and none exists for Brandon Aiyuk. What exists is a former NFL player, Emmanuel Acho, on record, on air, twice asking the only question anyone is actually in a position to ask right now. Is somebody checking on this man? That is the ceiling of what anyone can honestly claim. And that silence, the disappearance that stopped an entire organization cold, the one nobody inside that building could explain, this is what it was always covering. The 49ers voided the guarantee to the exact letter of a CBA forfeiture clause. The mechanism was precise, the legal ground was solid, and the process was swift. That part of the system worked exactly as designed. And then, a player spent months publicly unraveling in front of millions of people, and that same system had no equivalent move to make. It's not that the infrastructure doesn't exist on paper. The league and the union built real programs. A licensed behavioral health clinician required at every team facility, a 24-hour crisis line, free therapy sessions written into player insurance, a wellness app rolled out league-wide in 2024. By that year, 82% of active players had used at least one of those resources. So how does all of that exist and still none of it reaches a player who spent months disappearing in plain sight? Because every single one of those programs requires the player to walk through the door. And you can't build a protocol that reaches a man who has stopped answering the phone. The only formal union involvement on record in this entire case is a dispute over agent certification, paperwork. Andrew Brandt, a former NFL front office executive who spent over a decade negotiating contracts, said he had never once dealt with a player who disappeared with zero contact. None at all. His read was direct.
He is a persona non grata right now, it seems, from not only the team that he's still technically under contract with, but also future teams.
ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reported that teams he had spoken with described Aiyuk as essentially untradeable right now. That is the actual story sitting underneath all of this. Precise machinery for protecting the money built to the letter of the CBA. Nothing built at that same scale for protecting the person holding it. And in that space, a man spent months unraveling in public while the league moved forward with paperwork. As of now, nothing is resolved. No release, no trade, no answer. A warrant still open. Behind all of it is a wife he married last spring and a 5-year-old son he was praying with the night he apologized for going 104 miles an hour past his own stadium. The internet keeps filing this under content. It's really just a man nobody checked on. If this story matters to you, the super thanks button keeps this series going. Subscribe because the next story will blow your mind.